The quality of your week as CEO is rarely decided by what you know. Instead, it's decided by the habits you fall back on when the pressure rises, when problems start coming at you, and when everyone wants your attention. Because under pressure, good intentions disappear quickly. Strategic thinking goes first, priorities get blurred, and before long, the urgent is dictating your whole day. That's why the most effective CEOs, they operate differently. Not because they work harder, but because they've built habits that keep them focused, intentional, and performing at their best, even when the week gets demanding. I'm Byron Morrison. I'm the author of The Effective CEO 2.0. And after helping CEOs in 18 countries to become the leader their business needs, in this video, I'm going to break down 7 of my favorite habits of highly effective CEOs that make the biggest difference to their productivity, leadership, and performance. Habit number 1 is planning from the outcome rather than simply working from a to-do list. The way that most people approach their week is they write down everything they need to get done and then they work through it. The problem with that, though, is a to-do list is often built around what's important right now without factoring in what's important long term. This is why you can complete the entire list, stay busy all week, and still reach Friday unable to actually say what meaningfully moved forward. That's why the CEOs I work with plan backwards from the outcome. Every 30 to 90 days, they take a half day out of the business to really get clear on what success actually needs to look like by the end of that period. In that time, they think about everything from their goals and targets to what challenges and bottlenecks need to be solved, the most important priorities, and what does the team need to understand and be aligned on so they can then go and execute on that plan. That becomes the clarity that everything is then filtered through. And then they approach every single week looking at it through the lens of, does this get them closer to where they want to be? Or is it a distraction, busy work, or something disrupting their focus? One way I always advise clients to then start their week is to reverse engineer it. They do that by asking one of my favorite questions. Based on where you want to be in 90 days and the biggest priorities in the business right now, if you were to fast forward to 5 p.m. Friday, what would you have needed to move forward for this week to be a success? Because once you know that, that's when you can then organize your week around the outcome rather than whichever problem is shouting the loudest. Habit number 2 is protecting your high value time before anything else gets access to it. One thing I talk a lot about in my book, The Effective CEO 2.0, and my other videos and content is that there's a big difference between being busy and being effective. Because you can fill an entire day with meetings, decisions, and tasks that all feel important in the moment, yet they still leave the work that would actually move the business forward completely untouched. That's why the most effective CEOs, they identify the work where their judgment, attention, or authority creates the greatest value. And then they protect dedicated time for it before anything else fills their calendar. I'll give you an example. I had a CEO come to me when he was in the middle of a fundraising round. At the time, he was following the standard productivity advice where every single day he would create a to-do list and then tackle the most important tasks first. The problem is that as CEO, what feels most important is often what simply needs dealing with that day, and it's not factoring in what matters long term. And that's the trap the CEO was in, as every day was filled with operational problems, emails, and other challenges that needed his attention. Meaning by the end of the day, he maybe had an hour to focus on fundraising, by which point he was mentally drained and exhausted. But if he didn't secure that round, there wasn't going to be a business left to put fires out in. So to solve this, we rebuilt his calendar from the ground up. We worked out he needed around 15 hours a week to focus on writing pitches, giving presentations, and dealing with potential investors. Also, we worked out that his focus and energy was highest at the start of the day. So what we did is we blocked off 9 until 12 every single day where he only focused on these tasks. It was also communicated to the team that unless the building was on fire, he would be unavailable. Then only once he got those tasks done did he check his email, respond to messages, and dive into the rest of his to-do list. That's why highly effective CEOs are clear on their top priorities and they schedule time to focus on them before anything else. So, using the clarity you get from habit number one of getting clear on your goals, targets, and strategy, the next step is to allocate time to focus on them every single week. Figure out how much time they need, and when you're in the best energy and bandwidth to do them, then schedule that first. Because if you don't learn to prioritize your bigger picture tasks, your days will keep getting derailed by whatever feels more important or urgent in the moment. Habit number three is getting everything off your plate that shouldn't be on it. One of the questions that every CEO should be able to answer is what can genuinely only be done by me. Not what you prefer to do or you're good at, but instead what actually requires your specific judgment, focus, or authority. Everything outside of that, wherever possible, should be delegated to someone else. And this is key because highly effective CEOs recognize that you only have so much time and bandwidth, which is why everything you do, it has a cost. And getting involved in or doing things you shouldn't comes at the direct expense of not just your business, but every area of your life. Yet you'd be amazed how much time and energy overwhelmed CEOs are wasting in areas of the business that they shouldn't be involved in. When I do application calls for my Evolve CEO program, one question that I always ask is if you look back on an average day or week, how much of your time was spent on tasks, decisions, in meetings, or solving problems that really shouldn't have needed you? It's pretty common for CEOs to answer 70, 80, or sometimes even upwards of 90%. And in a 60-hour work week, that could mean 40 or 50 hours is going into work that didn't require the CEO. And often that happens because they're so busy trying to get stuff done that they don't stop to question whether they should or actually need to. That's why every morning I get my clients to do a daily audit where they look ahead at their tasks, meetings, and everything else they need to get done. And then looking at it through the lens of their defined role and responsibilities, they ask themselves three questions. Is this actually important? Does this need to be done by me? If not, who should own it? Because a few seconds of deliberate thought can save you hours every single week, which is time that can then be spent on growth and doing the things that only you can do. Habit number four is one of my favorite energy management strategies. I talk through this one in depth in my book, The Effective CEO 2.0, and it's the concept of push and pull days. Because what I found is that most high performers try to operate at the same level every day. They follow the same routines, keep the same schedule, they push themselves to be disciplined. And while this obviously works on paper, from an energy management standpoint, I found that it's far from optimal. In the book, I use an example of a client who, when we met, he was really energized Monday and Tuesday. Then Wednesday, he was a bit less focused. Thursday was a battle to get through the day. And Friday, he was completely drained to the point it was a complete write-off. So really, he was having 2 highly effective days a week. What I got him to do was implement the push and pull day structure. A push day is when you go all out. You take on higher bandwidth work, you do more meetings, and you have a greater output. A pull day is when you deliberately pull back. You do lower bandwidth tasks, you have fewer commitments, you work fewer hours, and you prioritize space to recover. For this client, because of how his energy was fluctuating, what I suggested was treating Monday and Tuesday as a push day where he continued going all out. And then on Wednesday, pulling back where he'd start later, he'd finish early, go to the gym, play golf, or whatever else he wanted to do to relax. At first, he was super hesitant and he told me all the reasons why he couldn't do it, but I convinced him just to try it to see what happened. And what he found was that by pulling back on Wednesday, he recharged his energy, meaning he could go into Thursday and Friday with the same level of focus that he had on Monday and Tuesday, meaning he essentially went from 2 highly effective days a week to 4. Now, everyone is different, so this approach does need testing, as one person's commitments, energy, patterns, and performance is going to vary from someone else's. The key here, though, is to stop judging your output and performance day to day and to start judging it across the week, as strategies like this will make it far less likely that you're going to burn out. One thing I will say, though, is I've had several clients come to me saying that they read the strategy in my book and it sounded great, but it would never work for them. Like one CEO who, when we started, was working 60 to 80-hour weeks, and he felt like he was drowning in things that needed his attention. He wanted to find balance and get back to the gym and spend more time with his family, but he just didn't think it was possible. But once we got clear on his role, delegating effectively, and got him out of the weeds, he's now working less than 40 hours and he structures his whole week this way. So much so that he's now got his entire team following this approach because he's recognized the importance of getting people energized and performing at their best. And he's not alone, as every week I speak to CEOs who are stuck in ways of thinking, operating, and leading that are no longer supporting the stage of the business they're at. The first step to changing that, though, is getting clarity on where specifically it's happening for you. That's why I created the CEO Evolution Assessment. It's a free diagnostic that in 7 minutes will help you uncover how you're showing up in the business and what needs to shift for you to become more effective in your role. It's free to take, and the link is in the description below. Habit number 5 is scheduling time to think rather than only stopping when a problem has already become urgent. When you're running a business, it's so easy to get stuck in a cycle where your days become consumed by firefighting and dealing with reactive problems. The reality, though, is there's no way you can make the right decisions or handle situations as your best self when you're in that high stress state. That's because there's a huge difference between a reaction and a response. A reaction is impulsive and driven by emotion, whereas a response is processed and controlled. And when you're constantly in the middle of things, reacting and surrounded by chaos, there's simply no way to think clearly or to process decisions properly. That's why the most effective CEOs allocate time to protect thinking and making decisions every single week, where they give themselves space to step back, to look at what's actually happening and to think through how to handle it effectively. I've seen varying approaches to this, from CEOs going on a walk to blocking off half a day from the office or going to work from a cafe, where they sit down and revisit the strategy, look at bottlenecks, check out on progress on projects, and look through decisions that need to be made. How you do it best will depend on you, but don't just block out 30 minutes and hope a breakthrough is going to happen. Instead, it's so important to use that time intentionally, where you ask yourself, what needs to happen to feel confident in making this decision? Why do problems keep happening, and what do we need to do to solve them? What opportunities are we overlooking that we then need to act on? The clarity that comes from the protective thinking time is often worth more than anything else you'll do in that week, especially when it'll help you hone your own focus and also take those insights to your team, where you can then align them with what needs to happen going forward. Habit number 6 is building a daily wrap-up into the end of your schedule. This is one of the most practical habits I give to CEOs, as often I'll hear about how they reach the end of their day and they've got all of these emails piling up, messages unanswered, and loose ends sitting unfinished. So instead of finishing work, they either have to continue late into the evening, or they physically go home while mentally carrying the weight of everything that still needs their attention. That's why I get clients to protect somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes at the end of every single day, specifically focusing on wrapping up. This is to keep on top of everyday tasks that are important, but keep getting pushed aside for whatever else felt more urgent in the moment. One thing I find works really well as well is setting a notification 30 minutes before wrapping up with the question, what do I need to get done so I can start wrapping up? That helps because if, say, wrap-up time is 4 p.m. and you don't have that transitional prompt, then it's easy to still be stuck in the middle of doing something else and then not put it aside and follow through. What I repeatedly see with CEOs is that once you build this habit consistently, it makes it far easier to go home and be present because you're not worried about all of the things that you're falling behind on. So really think about what are the daily actions that you need to keep on top of every single day. Figure out how much time you need for them and then block that into your schedule non-negotiable. That's how you're going to defend your time to really balance the tasks that need your focus and attention. Habit 7 is taking time to review how you operate, not just what you got done. Most overwhelmed CEOs are so busy trying to survive the day that they barely stop to process what actually happened. They just move from one meeting, decision, or problem to the next, then they wake up and repeat the same patterns again tomorrow. The issue with that is if you never stop and look back, You miss huge opportunities, repeated behaviors, and early signs showing you where something is starting to go wrong. That's why highly effective CEOs take time every day and week to reflect on what happened. With my private Evolve CEO clients, the way that I approach this is I track the entire journey. Everything from how they handled a difficult conversation to where their time got derailed, where they became reactive, and whatever else threw them off course. Then in our weekly sessions, we go back through it. We look at what happened, why it happened, what they may have missed, and what they need to do differently when they're in a similar situation in the future. The way I always frame it for them is it's a lot like an elite athlete going back and watching old game footage. That's how they figure out opportunities and ways to improve and how they can hone and get an edge. And if you want to be a highly effective CEO, then you have to treat your development the same way. Take some time at the end of the day to really think about what happened. What are the challenges that you went through? What could you have done better? What did you realize or learn? What tasks did you do that you shouldn't have? And what would have allowed you to feel more in control? The insights from these questions are going to help you uncover patterns and look for trends. Maybe you'll notice that it's always the same team member bringing you problems that they should be solving themselves. Or you're in a particular meeting, you have nothing to add that's taking your time and attention. If you didn't stop to reflect, then you'd miss these patterns and correlations completely. But once you recognize them, that's when you can act on them. And over time, proactive reflection doesn't just improve your skills or time management, it builds your confidence, intuition, and ability as a leader because you're learning from every situation rather than just walking into the next one as if you've never faced it before. That's why this is a core part of the process I use with my private clients. And also by tracking what's happening, it also means our sessions can be laser focused on their specific challenges and bottlenecks that need solving. So add it in every single day where you take a few minutes to reflect on what happened and learn from it. And that's going to help you massively improve for the future. With that being said, everyone knows how important habits and discipline are if you want to be successful, but what's often overlooked is how you actually stay consistent with them. That's why to finish off this video, I want to talk you through what's going to have the biggest impact on you actually sticking to and implementing these habits. That's why to finish this video, I want to talk you through what's going to have the biggest impact on you actually being able to stick to and implement these habits. And that is your identity. Because you can plan properly, defend your time, manage your energy, you can close the day deliberately and reflect on how you operate. But if part of you still feels the most useful when you're busy, involved, and needed, then you'll keep finding ways to undo it all. You'll block off time to focus and then let the day pull you back into something else. Or you'll hand over work that needs to be delegated and then step back in to fix it the moment an issue comes up. Or you'll create space to think and then fill it with something operational because solving a visible problem still feels more valuable than stepping back. This isn't always a discipline problem. It's often a sign that the way that you see your role, your value, and yourself hasn't evolved at the same pace as the business. And because you're the person inside the pattern, it can be incredibly difficult to recognize where it's happening and what's actually driving it. The first step in changing these behaviors is getting honest about any gaps that exist in how you're thinking, leading, and operating inside of your role. That's exactly what the CEO Evolution Assessment is designed to help you identify. It's a free diagnostic that in 7 minutes will help you uncover whether the way you're currently operating has evolved at the same pace as the business, where the company is still too dependent on you, and what needs to change first. And if you're running a scaling company, I personally review every submission and I send back a personalized breakdown of the patterns I see and what I would suggest focusing on first. The link to take it is in the description below. So there you have it, 7 habits of highly effective CEOs. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. What were your biggest takeaways and which of these habits are you going to start focusing on implementing first? Let me know your thoughts and questions down in the comments below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and hit the subscribe button as every week I put out new videos on how to become a better CEO. I've been Byron Morrison. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.